Welcome to the Wellness Rebel Show, where you reclaim your health and tap into your body's healing power. I'm your host, Fatima, here to empower you with the knowledge and tools to take charge of your well-being. Whether you want to boost energy, improve mindset, or unlock vitality, this is your go-to source for practical advice and inspiration. It's time to step into your power and live a life of health and freedom. Welcome to the revolution. Welcome back to the Wellness Rebel Show. Today I have Dr. Trisha Zehrung. Did I say that right?
You are.
And so she's a fertility expert, and we're going to talk about all things fertility and what most women are suffering from nowadays. So welcome, Dr. Trisha.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. As you said, my name is Dr. Trisha. I'm a nurse practitioner and fertility consultant. I have been doing this for 2 years now as a business. However, I've been doing this for a long time for friends and family and myself, honestly. After I struggled with my own fertility with recurrent pregnancy loss and was just felt so lost in the traditional medical model, being told I needed to lose more babies. And that obviously did not sit well with me. And being a practitioner myself, I knew there had to be more that could be done for women and couples who are sitting in this space of, keep trying for a year and then, hey, guess what? You need to do for these really, really expensive fertility treatments with no guidance or support or advice in the in-between at all. And so that's really where my business was birthed. Trying to solve those problems for myself, and then realizing with my education and my experience that I could also then bring that to others.
Nice. So how long did you guys struggle with your, with the conceiving journey?
Yeah. So for my journey looks a little bit different than others. I think everybody's journey looks a little bit different. For us, my husband and I got married, 2016. And we started to try shortly after that. And we were just like the first month trying, we got pregnant. And then that was when I experienced a very early miscarriage. And it just like wasn't even on my radar at all. And there's so many like layers to it, the fact that I was caught off guard because it just wasn't on my radar, even as a practitioner, the fact that I felt like I needed to suffer through it at my work day as a busy professional nurse practitioner woman, feeling like I couldn't share with anybody. And I just had to like finish out my work day instead of just being like, hey, like I'm experiencing something, I need to go. So that's something that I think a lot of women can resonate with. And then just like the journey after of like, okay, well, like what happens next? Why did this happen? And the truth is, when it happens the first time, it's not uncommon. And I decided that I wanted to talk about it, that I didn't like just keeping it to myself. And the more I started talking about it, the more I realized so many other women had experienced miscarriage as well. And so then I didn't feel so alone. Then we experienced a completely normal pregnancy with my son. I gave birth to him in 2017 in Japan. Whole nother story in and of itself in a Japanese birthing center. And then when we decided it was time, we decided we wanted to have more. We started trying again, and we experienced then more miscarriages, 2 miscarriages back to back. And we were living in Japan at the time. I had never felt so alone in my life. My husband was like kind of home and gone, home and gone. I'm in another country. I had no family nearby. And the doctors were just like, oh, well, like, you have to lose more because you've already had a normal baby. So, you need to have more losses before we'll actually even like look into this. And I knew that there had to be more to that story, and there had to be some things that I could do to feel a little bit more in control so that I could let go of those things that I couldn't control. And so that's really where that all started. I started digging, and then we ended up having my daughter my progesterone was low, but she was my little like miracle baby. And held on. And then we had another miscarriage before having my third son. And through all of that, I just experienced all the like loneliness and the lack of care in traditional medicine. And so, gosh, I guess really over a few years is how that all transpired and built upon one another. But I discovered that, I did have low progesterone, and lo and behold, I also had some gut issues that needed to be addressed. I also had thyroid concerns. And so this time around, since we are expecting again, which isn't common knowledge, but now it is, I was off my levothyroxine that I'd been on since I was 15 years old. and I'm not on it currently. Been off of it for a while now and maintaining throughout pregnancy. This is the first pregnancy that we didn't experience a loss beforehand. And this is, I did not need progesterone as I did with my last son. I did not need progesterone at all this pregnancy because it was perfect. So true healing can happen, my friends.
Yeah. So, what did you do differently this time so that, to achieve this kind of healing?
Yeah. So I really practiced what I preach with all of my clients. And it wasn't like, a quick journey. Even I had been practicing a lot of this even before I got pregnant with my son, and just taking care of, my nutrition and focusing on eating whole foods and lowering toxins and managing stress, and all those pieces, and movement, of course, for our bodies. But all that does take some time. And so, especially to reboost progesterone, that's why I'm not completely opposed to some traditional medicine. It just shouldn't be our first step. It needs to
Yeah.
be like a later down the road. We need to address those key fertility foundations first. And so that's really where I started. And then as I started working with clients, I really wasn't like in the actively like trying to conceive because I had just had a baby. But that was when I really dug into my gut health and did some strategic gut health testing, as I do with all of my clients, to discover if I had imbalances happening in the gut that were contributing to other concerns and issues. And oftentimes there is. So same, found that there was some things off in my gut that I could address, some dysbiosis, fix that with strategic supplementation, again, strategic nutrition, lifestyle, and optimized that, which in turn optimized my thyroid, which in turn optimized my fertility. So it's all really like a trickle effect. So many women have so many things going on and they think they're like separate issues, but in reality, they're not. They're all connected.
Yeah, yeah. I know every time I hear someone say, "How do I lower my cortisol?" or it's like they just only like think of one hormone or one thing. Like our body's not compartmentalized, it's a whole system. If there's something that's out of balance in one area, there is for sure in other areas as well. That's all connected. So that's see, there's hope, my friends. Did you ever Oh, you said that the doctors in Japan didn't really look into your losses. So, do you ever work with women or couples that have been trying for so long and then a doctor would tell them, oh, you just need to do IVF or something like that? And then they decided not to and instead seeked out other alternative methods. Do you work with those couples and have you had, you know, success helping them get pregnant in a more natural method?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times that is the case. And truly, because so many doctors are so quick to just say that, as soon as you get sent to a fertility specialist, like it's on the docket, like that's like your next steps. It's different than other like specialties, I guess, in that like you go to a specialist to try to figure out what is wrong. You go from your generalist to your specialist so that you can figure out what's wrong. Although even times then you just get a medication and you're like, oh yeah, I gotta take this for the rest of your life. But when you're dealing with the fertility model, you're going from your OB who has done some simple testing and they've done some workups. You've waited, check mark, you've waited the year, and then they send you to fertility. And they're gonna check mark, is reproductive system okay? Like structurally, is everything, tubes are working, patent, everything like that. Check, which is a good test to have. I agree. Like, let's make sure all of that is good. And then they're going to check some basic labs sometimes as far as like baseline hormones. But really, their next step is to like, we're either going to do IUI or we're going to do IVF. It's not like, hey, let's peel back some more layers and let's figure out why you're struggling to conceive. Their sole purpose is to just figure out a way to get you the baby,
Yeah.
even if your body isn't actually ready to do that. And
Yeah.
of course, most of the time, it's not covered by insurance. So it's expensive. And your fertility, struggling with fertility, is a sign that something more is going on in your body. And so I spend a lot of time trying to make this connection, especially to in my like social media, of the connection between like your overall health and your fertility. They're connected. And there's so many signs of things that are oftentimes, I think, blown off in traditional medicine anyway. Like, I'm kind of bloated, or I have heavy, painful periods. Well, birth control for that until you're ready to conceive. And then, like, okay, well, there was actually a sign that something more was happening. and we covered it up with a Band-Aid, and now that you're ready to get pregnant, like we need to address that. Or again, you end up in that fertility office being pushed towards like IVF. And so I find a lot of clients who have kind of been through that journey where they had a lot of vague symptoms growing up, and they either got pushed on the pill or they got blown off. And then now they're trying to build their family, and they're being told this isn't going to happen for you. You need IVF, especially too when it comes to age. I have an awesome story of a client who was told that they would need IVF because of her age. They'd been trying. She had had a miscarriage. And I'm like, no, girlfriend, like your body did this, like it can do this again. And they were like pushing her and telling her like that it was laughable that, you know, he's doing malpractice if he doesn't push her towards IVF. Like it was this whole, like he was very forceful about it. And we worked on getting rid of H. pylori that was present in her gut. We finally got rid of it and got everything optimized for her. And she is probably, I think she's like, oh gosh, she's probably like almost 28 weeks pregnant at this point now. So she'll be delivering here before we know it. But, you know, she was told it was her absolute only option was IVF. And it's just not true always. Sometimes we get there, but we shouldn't get there before we've really peeled back a lot of the layers to optimize everything first anyway, because even if we do need to get there, we want your body. You're making a huge investment. Like it's an investment to work with me. I get that because you're investing in your health, but it's a huge investment that you're making for IVF, like, you know, threefold. And why would you not want to put your body in the best place it could possibly be if you have to get there and then potentially prevent yourself from getting there in the first place?
Yeah. IVF is not even really 100%, right?
No. And a lot of times I've had a lot of clients come to me too who had been like, they made me feel like this was a sure thing. And then they didn't get like any eggs. And then they just kind of said like, well, sorry, you need to like, you know, the biggest one I hear is like, you just need to lose weight. Okay, well, that's really not helpful. Like, how do I lose weight? You know, these people aren't just like not trying to lose weight. It's just, it's harder because they've got underlying gut health issues. They've got blood sugar regulation issues. And there's all these things that are playing under the surface. And so those clients, some of those clients are my favorite because they come in and I show them how. And they're willing to do it. They just didn't know how before. And then their cycles come back and they're ovulating. And it's just the coolest thing to see because they thought that this was impossible. And the winds just start rolling in. And guess what? Before too long, they're pregnant because they're actually ovulating and their body's doing what it needs to do. And, you know, it didn't really take all that much, you know, all that much. They just needed to know how to do it.
Yeah. I wish that, I mean, I know that it's a big money maker, that fertility clinics and all that stuff. So that's probably the reason why they don't teach, you know, women and couples like lifestyle changes, like all these things that we can peel back before actually doing the treatment if it is really needed. So how long do you think? So let's say someone is trying like with all the lifestyle changes and all these things, but there is still like no improvement. Would that just be like, you know, like the last resort, right? The IVF or
Yeah, so I think that this is kind of like my strategic process. It's like, okay, let's start with foundations first, see how much we can like make shifts and see changes, especially depending on like how many things are like going on, like what cycles look like. Are they regular? Are they not regular? How many changes have you made so far? Like where can we really like get in the nitty gritty together and figure out where we can optimize things? And then of course, functional testing is like my next layer. So let's get into some functional testing because you can be doing all your nutrition and lifestyle things correctly. But if you have long standing underlying gut issues, we just need to move the needle faster and know exactly what we're dealing with. So, you know, more comprehensive serum testing, looking at like iron, vitamin status, thyroid, all those day 3 hormones, things like that. So just really making sure we've actually addressed everything because honestly, most times my clients come to me, they have not even had a full actual workup of their hormones, which is sad but true. And then they definitely haven't had those things like iron regulation and all of that are outside of the reproductive system that we know very directly affect the reproductive system. So that and a GI map, sometimes a Dutch test, depending on my clients, just to see how they're metabolizing all those hormones. If we've kind of run and optimized everything there, then my next step would be to, okay, let's have a conversation on what the vaginal microbiome looks like. Sometimes we'll do some vaginal microbiome testing just to make sure there's no silent infections, which can happen, that would be killing the sperm and keeping it from meeting the egg. Especially would do that sooner if there was like signs and symptoms of infection. Like, I get like BV very, regularly, or a lot of yeast infections, like that would put a red flag. We would do that sooner. But if there's no red flags, that would be something we cover a little bit later. Maybe like a metabolomics test that looks at micronutrient status to see like, okay, well, where can we optimize the micronutrients to really optimize the egg quality and make sure that your body has exactly what it needs to function. We do those later because if the gut's off, it's a waste of time. I don't want to see that testing, because if your gut isn't working, it's not absorbing those things anyway. Like, it's a waste of time and money. So we optimize there first. We kind of trickle down and keep like peeling back the layers. Then, of course, if it still hasn't happened, we're making sure all those things are optimized. Then I'm talking to my clients about like and pairing with their fertility specialist to kind of dig deeper into maybe structural abnormalities, as far as like, yes, maybe they had an HSG, but have you had a scope? Is there any possibility of like endometriosis, things like that. And then once we know we've optimized everything and it still hasn't happened, and this all goes, of course, male side too, working on optimizing the sperm quality. If both sides of the coin have been addressed and we've really been working, and then of course we're going to talk about like what feels right to them as next steps. So maybe it's IUI, maybe it is IVF, but they've done all the work. And my few clients who have made it to IVF have had 100% success rate. And they've had really good results as far as like the embryos they've gotten, genetically normal embryos they've gotten compared to, what their labs and everything looked like previously. So they've had really good results. And unfortunately, not a lot of my couples have to get there, but, sometimes you do, and that's what it's there for. But it's not there as like a first step. It's there as like you said, a kind of a last resort.
Yeah. And I feel like too, it's really important to work on the foundations. And like you said, like if they were working on all the foundations and then they had to still get the IVF or IUI, and then they have, it seems like they have much better outcomes because their body is, their health is optimized.
Yeah. And not only better outcomes, but more peace of mind.
Yeah.
Because I think that so many are just like, well, I feel like I want to make sure I've done everything that I can on my own before I get there. And a lot of those people end up finding like there is a lot to address when they take that leap of faith and dig into this holistic side of being able to like optimize things on their own, and they make huge moves. And then sometimes, you still get there, and that's okay, because they still have that peace of mind that they've done everything in their control to have their body set up for success. And really, it's true, knowing that they're going into it in good health is going to also lower the stress levels surrounding it, which we know is going to increase success rates alone, having less stress.
Right? Yeah. So you mentioned endometriosis. I always have a hard time saying that word. Do you see a lot of suffering from endometriosis in this journey?
I personally have not I've had a few clients who have endometriosis, and kudos to them for coming. I think endometriosis, a lot of times, especially, is heavily hit as like only like can be dealt with in a traditional medical standpoint of like, it just has to be removed. It has to have surgery. The only way you can truly diagnose it is through a laparoscopy. But honestly, there's a lot of research that supports endometriosis being connected to the gut and different dysbiosis and overgrowths of bacteria in the gut, and imbalances and inflammation there. So there's a lot of support there. I think that is just not mainstream knowledge. And we need to shout that a little bit more from the rooftops to let people know that, having this surgical excision is not your only option. And granted, maybe it is like necessary, but it's going to come back if we don't address the underlying root cause. And so I think there's so much room for improvement when it comes to like that endometriosis care. And all of it really goes back to is like, I'm not trashing, those fertility doctors. They don't know what they don't know. And they didn't learn it in school, just like I didn't learn it in school. They're
Yeah.
not learning that. They're learning what drugs work for what thing. They're not learning nutrition and lifestyle and the connection between the gut and the and endometriosis or PCOS or any of it. But the research is there.
Yeah. I I feel like the Western medical model is kind of like all about kill, 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 or cut, cut, cut. I mean, like you said, they're useful for, certain things, last resort, emergencies, and whatnot, but definitely shouldn't be like the first, how do you say it? Like your first plan of action, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Especially, and I've read somewhere it's like if you're on a pill forever, like, did it really actually like cure you? Like, it didn't.
Yeah.
But again, if we want to get real political on it, like most of the schools are supported by pharmaceutical companies. So,
Yeah.
when I was in nursing school and NP school and learned, like, you just learned this drug fixes this and this one fixes this and this one fixes the one that one does. And
Right.
or the side effects that one causes, and on and on and on. But we don't learn enough about nutrition and lifestyle, and unfortunately, it takes, especially for providers that dig into like the functional medicine side of things, a lot of time it takes their own health struggles and failure in the traditional medical model
Mhm.
themselves for them
Yeah.
to like wake up and be like, oh,
Yes.
turns out what we feed ourselves actually does matter.
Right. Yeah.
You would have thought.
I believe that a lot of times you see these Western medical doctors switch to the functional medicine side because they were failed by, like what they already know and it's not helping them. Let's talk about, I was going to talk about what was the term of what's the surgical procedure for taking out endometriosis?
Oh, the laparoscopy,
Yeah,
exploratory
laparoscopy.
laparoscopy.
I had a friend from high school. She had really bad endometriosis, and she did that procedure, and they didn't know that there was cancer in
Mm.
there. And after she had her procedure, like she just like bam, stage 4 or whatever, and like she passed away so quickly because it just spread over her body so quickly because is that what happens? Like it breaks, or maybe the procedure that she did was just like that. Like it wasn't contained. Like everything just like spread out. It was
Yeah, I
crazy.
wonder if it just like introduced it to different areas, or the cancer cells like moved or
Yeah,
migrated or something. Yeah, I don't know as much on that, but that's horrible and sad.
yeah, yeah. I know there are really risks to everything, obviously. So is PCOS directly? If you have endometriosis, does that mean you have PCOS, or are they like totally different things?
Yeah, they're totally different things. You can have both. However, they're totally different. PCOS is really like a metabolic disorder of but affects the ovaries. So a lot of it has, and there are now more like typing as far as like PCOS is not as classic as we thought necessarily. There's different like subtypes because traditionally we've seen they want to diagnose it only if you're like overweight. They're like, if you're
Yeah.
lean, oh no, you could never have PCOS. Like, you're too skinny. But we found that that's not true. Like, there's a lot of women out there struggling with what we call, I guess, like lean PCOS. There is some criteria for PCOS diagnosis to be met. It's the Rotterdam criteria. Usually it's 2 out of the 3. So you're going to have like androgen symptoms or high testosterone symptoms like hair, facial growth, things like that. You don't have to have that necessarily. You would see like what's called a string of pearls on ultrasound. So essentially, you just have a lot of different follicles that none of them are completely maturing, but you have lots of them. And then irregular or anovulatory cycles. So it can be a little challenging to get a diagnosis of PCOS if things are looking PCOS ish, like if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, let's just call it a duck and treat it as such, or address it as such, because we know with PCOS, like the most powerful way to move the needle on PCOS is with nutrition and lifestyle. It doesn't mean that the person gave themselves PCOS. They were just
Hmm.
kind of predestined, I guess, pre genetics might have played a role in that. There's a lot of pieces that makes it like harder for them necessarily sometimes to lose weight and have that insulin resistance. So then it just becomes like this cyclical thing. And then we, introduce the standard American diet, and, you're raised in that, you're not told anything about nutrition. And sometimes it's just like this cyclical thing where you had it, you were predisposed to it, but then we've made it worse because of everything that we've been exposed to. And sometimes when we lower a lot of those things that are like making it worse, we can see the body regulate. So there's so many different things that we can do from a perspective of PCOS to really, like, I know they say like, oh, if I have PCOS, I had to have fertility treatments. So it's just not true. In some cases, maybe, but I think the majority of cases, no. Like if someone helps you put the pieces together of why you're struggling with that, why, what does your gut health look like, what overgrowth do you have, what do your bacteria in your gut that are so important for metabolic health, what do those look like? Oftentimes I see them, they're so low. Once we rebuild those, we introduce more whole foods, we learn how to eat, not diet. We're not even talking calories half the time, or even macros sometimes besides protein intake. They're just really focusing more on just like whole foods. We see the needle move so much, and we see ovulation restored
Yeah.
and regular cycles restored in those clients, just because they have like a strategic path ahead of how to manage it. I think a strategic supplementation like myoinositol is really amazing for PCOS, because it has been shown to lower the insulin resistance. It's going to improve egg quality. It's going to help restore ovulation. So that's a really helpful strategic supplement. A lot of women with PCOS get prescribed metformin to help lower insulin resistance, to help restore their ovulation. Metformin actually somehow, in a roundabout way, they're not really sure exactly how, but it actually does raise Akkermansia levels some, which lo and behold is a bacteria in the gut that helps your your metabolic health. However, metformin comes with a lot of side effects. A lot of times it doesn't work for all women. And it's been shown in research that berberine is actually more effective and better tolerated than metformin. So that's an option as well, especially if insulin resistance is a big piece of the puzzle. Again, most people with PCOS don't even get their fasting insulin levels checked. So it's like, okay, well, how do we know if we're moving the needle in the right direction?
Yeah. What are signs for, like, if you're not testing for insulin resistance, what are going to be the signs or symptoms that you might have insulin resistance?
Yeah. Well, definitely there can be like periods, like if you're going without eating for long periods, like you can't tolerate that. Like you feel like you have to eat all the time. Blood sugar drops, feeling like you get lightheaded pretty easily, like when your blood sugar drops. Again, that frequent like snacking, sugar cravings at night. If you're really stressed, cortisol is high, that affects blood sugar and insulin secretion and production. Those anovulatory cycles or irregular cycles. So an irregular cycle is anything that varies like more than plus or minus 1 to 2 days. So your cycle should not vary by more, like your personal cycle should not vary by more than 1 to 2 days. If it does, that's considered irregular. That can be a sign that you're struggling with PCOS or insulin resistance. It could be irregular for other reasons, so we need to dig a little bit deeper to that, but that can be a sign as well. Of course, difficulty losing weight, weight loss resistance, even though you feel like you're doing all the things right.
Yeah. Eating less, exercising more.
Yeah.
You mentioned the protein. I know protein is very important for even blood sugar regulation, right?
Mhm.
Do you, I know there's like different, camps or whatever, like, oh, you need to eat this much protein or this much protein. What is for you, like in your practice, what's kind of your, let's just say like average protein intake, or is it based on weight, or what is it based on?
Yeah. So for me personally, with my clients, I try to keep things as simple in the beginning as possible. So I know the majority of my clients are coming to me and they're way under eating protein. So, I kind of get a 3-day food journal from them and get an idea of like what they're eating. And all of them are like way low in protein. So my recommendation always from the get-go for everybody across the board is aim for 90 to 120 grams. If you can do that, great. Okay. It still might not be enough for them based on like their body fat percentage, or really better to base it off of muscle mass, honestly. But I'm not trying to get in the weeds in the beginning. I'm trying to really help them simplify this and make it as easy as possible. So, I tell them 90 to 120 grams of protein, lots of fruits and veggies. I do usually give them a fiber goal of like, trying to slowly increase to between 25 to 45 grams of fiber, slowly increase that. Cause again, a lot of them are not getting enough fiber either. And if they can make those shifts, they're already moving things in the right direction. I'm not even worried at that point about like how many carbs they're intaking, because if they're going to shift from eating more protein and more fruits and veggies, naturally the rest of the stuff's just going to kind of fall to the side. They're not going to eat as much processed foods because they're not hungry, as they were before, if they're prioritizing those two things.
Yeah. Have you had, wait, I'm going to think about this question real quick. I want to go back to PCOS. And is that most like kind of like a very common diagnosis for a lot of women that's struggling to get pregnant? Or is that just like not as much compared to maybe thyroid conditions or?
No, I think that, well, whether it's overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, I'm not really sure, but it is a common thing that I see where women are struggling, and I see a lot of insulin resistance coming back in labs. I'm not diagnosing anybody with PCOS. We're just like literally digging deeper if they haven't been. I do have a lot of women who have come to me who have been diagnosed. I do see it a lot. Across the board. And I do think, especially when we're dealing with irregular cycles, it needs to be considered. However, sometimes we can see the opposite where women are just completely under fueling. And so that's why their cycle is not present. So we need to dig deeper. But I do see a lot of PCOS. I see a lot of just like mostly just unexplained infertility. Is probably what I see the most of. Even unexplained secondary infertility, where we, just need to dig a little bit deeper and figure out, okay, what is going on? The big thing and common denominator across the board for the majority of my clients is there's inflammation. Where it stems from, it depends, and that's different for everybody, usually something from the gut. But if we have chronic underlying inflammation, inflammation is meant to be a good thing, right? It's supposed to come and heal things up and do its job. But when it's chronic, and every day we're being exposed to this low-lying inflammation, the first thing that's going to go is our reproductive importance, our procreation, because that's the least of the most important things. Like our body has to prioritize all the other things to keep it safe. And when it has chronic underlying inflammation, it doesn't feel safe. And so it doesn't feel safe for procreation. So if we can lower that inflammatory load and shut off that silent alarm that's going off in our body telling us not to procreate because we have inflammation, by addressing gut health, lessening the toxins we're exposed to, giving our body the nutrients that it needs to thrive versus just survive, and so on, we lower that threshold and we allow procreation to be a priority again.
Yeah, that's true. Our body's main priority is to keep us alive. And if it doesn't feel safe, it's not going to get pregnant no matter how hard you try. So what would be considered, I know like I see a lot of people too who are experiencing secondary infertility. Like they say, "Oh, I got pregnant really easily the first time and then now I'm having a hard time." Are there criteria for that, like, oh, how long you've been trying and, to be considered to have like, that you're experiencing secondary infertility? Or is it just like from the get-go, like, oh, now I'm having a hard time getting pregnant even though I've just tried for 1 month, now I have secondary infertility?
No, I think it falls typically from a medical standpoint back under the try for a year. And then you would be diagnosed with that officially, or even 6 months, depending on your age above 35, that 1 year window shrinks to 6 months.
Okay.
However, if it was easy for you to get pregnant the first time and you've been trying for 6 months, I don't think there's any reason to wait. I think that actually before you start trying, 3 to 6 months before you start trying again is the prime time to start prepping your body, because the more you prep your body, the healthier your baby's going to be, regardless across the board, whether you struggle or not. But when we see secondary infertility, your body gave a lot to grow that baby, and that baby took what it needed. It didn't suffer. It took what it needed, and you were left depleted. And postpartum, there's a lot of depletion in that postnatal period. And then we add on the pressure of returning to work and the pressure of just like doing all the things and being a perfect mom and all those things. And then not having time to eat because you're taking care of another human being. You see all this depletion. And then if there were, underlying gut issues prior that you were still able to get pregnant the first time, sometimes we see those get worse. And so what maybe didn't affect pregnancy the first time around does affect the second time around. So there's so many like pieces to the puzzle still where, we know your body can do this, but it's just we need to like shift things in the right direction to get your body prioritizing procreation again.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to, I'm going to talk about toxins because we're bombarded with toxins every single day. What would your top thing to avoid if someone was trying to get pregnant or they're struggling with their hormones?
Yeah. So, well, in these toxic products, there's things called endocrine disruptors or xenoestrogens as well that mimic estrogens. So that's how they disrupt our hormones. And they're found in things like plastics, laundry detergent, our air, water, all the things that I'm not saying all this to scare anybody because we really cannot live a toxin free life, but we can lower the threshold. And the way that I usually recommend starting is think of the products that you put on your body on a daily basis. So that would be like your laundry detergent because you wash your clothes in it and you put your clothes on every day. Things like your deodorant. If you wear makeup, I obviously don't wear makeup every day, so that wouldn't be one of my top priorities. But deodorant and my laundry detergent, maybe my cleaning supplies, some of those top things that we're really exposed to a lot, and take a look at them. And you can use an app called, it's the EWG app, the Environmental Working Group. It's a really great app. You can look up your products and see like kind of what they rate as far as like hormone disrupting or not. And I would start to swap some of those things you use every day for less toxic products. You're going to move the needle the most by, swapping out things that you use every single day. I would start limiting things like perfumes and the, Bath and Body Works. No, we're going to save those for date night. I'm not saying you have to throw them away. Just save them for date night, especially if you just bought a whole bunch of them on Black Friday sale. And those are things you don't want to use in your home every single day because they carry a lot of high toxin load. Things like microwaving plastic containers. You don't have to throw all your plastic containers out today and replace them with glass because that's expensive. However, that's true. They have approximately, like 5 more hours to get those Cyber Monday deals in. But anyway, there's always sales. There's never not sales.
Right.
I love a good discount code. So got lots of those over here if you need any for any non-toxic products. But the biggest thing though would be to not microwave them. Don't microwave anything in a plastic container because it takes all those toxins and it allows them to release right into your food. So those would be some like big needle movers. If you're doing those things, like those are easy, small shifts. And then you're not panicking over trying to like break the bank over replacing every single product in your home. Like focus on the things that you use every day first, and then slowly swap things out as you run out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. How about when it comes to food? Do you always recommend like your clients to eat 100% organic, or do you just do the EWG Dirty Dozen? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on their budget. Like, buy organic what you can. Yes, the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 are a really good resource for just kind of like looking at what matters the most. But I also like, it's not like it's a balance. I'm not like don't ever go out to eat again because they use canola oil. Like, it's 80/20. You've got to live. So I try to really teach them like how to strategically make those like choices of like when you do that. Cause like, especially for like the holidays, we very easily use November and December as an entire 2 months of treats and cookies and eating out and parties and all the things. But in reality, like it's 2 days, maybe give you 4 Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Christmas Eve, Christmas. Like it's 4 days. That's it, really. So
Yeah.
you just have to be mindful. Like you have goals. So you got to pick strategically those things. But I do recommend like trying to buy organic where you can, especially like from a meat standpoint, trying to do more organic grass fed meats. And as far as like fruits and veggies as best as you can, but really just like doing the best that you can. I mean, if you were eating highly processed garbage before, like whatever veggies you get your hands on are probably better than none.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're just
Yeah.
like making slow progress. I'm not opposed, I try to make it easy too. Like, you want some frozen veggies? You do some frozen veggies. Like, if that's what gets you to eat your veggies the majority of the week, like, go for it.
Yeah. What's better,
Just,
frozen or canned?
oh, definitely, definitely frozen. Yeah, definitely frozen. I do try to like discourage canned. Although I do even use myself canned chicken sometimes to make my chicken salad, but I try to get the organic one I get it off of Thrive Market. I forget the brand. I can't remember the brand. But anyway, like sometimes you just got to make it simple. But yeah, frozen is definitely going to be the better option. They don't really lose it's been shown that like when you freeze them like that, they don't really lose the nutrients. They
Yeah.
maintain those pretty well.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, the canned is lined with BPA. There are
Yes.
companies now that are doing away from BPA lining, but then you have to ask what lining are you using?
Yeah. Like, are they just taking advantage of that they can say no BPA and they're using
Yeah.
something toxic? Like some of the butters are like grass fed butter, and it's like your grass fed butter is 5% grass fed butter, but those terms they're
Regulated.
not controlled,
Yeah.
so you can say whatever you want basically.
Yep. It's like the
It's
eggs.
sad. These companies make it so hard, and no wonder people get frustrated and they give up because just when you think you're doing the right thing, you find out you're not. And it's very frustrating. And so I understand that. So I try to like walk these people through this hand in hand as much as I possibly can.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on alcohol? Do you require your clients to give it all up, or is it also like
Yeah. Well, it's not a tyranny, it's a democracy. They can do whatever they want. I'm just giving them the information.
yeah,
So I do have a conversation that, at the end of the day, alcohol is a toxin. We know that. However, I get wanting to have a glass of wine here and there because I do too, but we have to be mindful and pick those situations. We do talk about like definitely not doing alcohol during eradication phases of like gut health protocols because the liver is already doing a lot of work to get rid of those toxins from the bad bacteria. Some of my clients are like, yeah, I'll just give it up. They're totally fine with that. Some of them are just like, I don't want to feel like it brings a little bit of joy to them. And I'm like, fine, go for it. Like, but
yeah,
we're like, this is not, there is some research, that like less than a couple of glasses a week is fine, like minimal research on that. But, I think that's probably the camp that I end up in. Like, I don't think I'm not going to like be super upset if you're having like a glass of wine on the weekend here and there. But, if it's a continual weekly thing, a couple nights a week, things like that, like that compounds, and we know it affects egg quality. It's and sperm quality. Those
yeah,
are alcohol is one of the most studied toxins on egg and sperm quality that we know. So I, make sure I have those conversations. But I also, again, it's kind of in the same thing as nutrition. Like it's a balance. And so if you want to have a glass of wine here and there, have a glass of wine.
yeah,
The
yeah.
stress you're causing yourself over having the glass of wine is probably worse than the actual glass of wine.
Right. That's the same thing that I say too. Like when, like, oh, the canola oil that the restaurant's using when you're eating out, you stressing over that's gonna kill you faster than the canola oil itself. It's not like you're eating out breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's really just like being true to yourself of like, how often am I doing this? Am I doing this every single week? A couple of times a week? Like every weekend I'm going out breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or, lunch and dinner? Or am I just having it here once in a while and it's really not that big of a deal?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know that the seed oils are such a big thing. Do consumption of seed oils, because we pretty much grew up consuming seed oils. Like our parents didn't know any better.
Mhm.
um, does that affect fertility a lot, or is that just kind of like
Well, I think it's all just like buckets. Like it's a
Mhm.
toxin load. Like think of it as like a bucket that's
Yeah.
filling up. And so over time, the amount of things that are toxic to us in this world and country have increased,
Yeah.
right? Like all these things that they did to save time and save money are now having detrimental effects on our health, not just our fertility, but overall across the board. And we're seeing that. And we have to lower the bucket because the bucket's
Yeah.
overflowing, the toxin bucket is overflowing for a lot of us. And that, I think, is part of why we see so much infertility, and it getting more prevalent and more prevalent and more prevalent because we're just now realizing like all these things are actually really harmful. And like you said, our parents didn't know, and they're like, "That's a fine when I was a kid." Okay, well, it was made a lot, heck of a lot different when you were a kid than it was when I was. And so I just think that we're seeing that like aftermath more
Mhm. Yeah.
now. And so what I say, it's like just the seed oils. Well, no, I think it's everything,
Everything. Yeah.
but it's all culminates onto each other and ends up causing this inflammation in our body. So we just lower the needles where we can.
Yeah.
And do I think that means 100% never having like a seed oil again? No, because it's really it's impossible, honestly, if you want to like lead a semi normal life. It's not
Normal life.
impossible. I know people who do it, and kudos to them and great. And like, I get why, because we know how horrible it is for them. I listened to a podcast not that long ago. It was like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
stuff's like disgusting. But it's in so many things. And you go out to eat, you don't know what they're using. And not everybody can afford to go to like the nicest restaurants where they will make those swaps.
Yeah.
But I think it's just lowering the threshold enough the majority of the time to move the needle and lower that toxin, like get some of the bucket emptied so
Yeah.
that our body can function the way that God made it to function.
Right. Yeah. And I know it depends too on where you live. We live in the middle of nowhere. No matter if I paid for the seed oil scout app for restaurants, there will not be restaurants like that where I live. And yeah, it is more expensive when you seek out those kinds of restaurants because it's more expensive to, get the raw materials. Like a
Mhm.
lot of restaurants get 5-gallon buckets of the canola oil or soy oil for so cheap, and they have to make their money. That's just how it is. We have to kind of not suffer, but we kind of have to give up some of like that, like, oh, I'm 100% toxic free for the sake of convenience.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a good testament to like, not eating out all the time and just
Yeah.
that being like an enjoyment thing versus like a desperation, like I have nothing to eat because I didn't plan ahead thing
Yeah.
versus like
Yeah.
I want to go out to eat because I want to, because I
Exactly.
want to, or
I
a
don't want to quit.
celebration.
I don't want to wash dishes.
Right. I feel that. I feel that 100%. Yeah, so it's more like, we plan ahead and we cook most of our meals at home. I mean, there's so much research I think out there just about like the changes in people's lives, literally not even like eating, like making like paleo or anything like that, literally just
Yeah.
like cooking from home,
From home.
period.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Cooking from home makes
you
so many
know the
changes.
ingredients that goes into what you're cooking.
Mhm,
And also, you know that you're cooking it hopefully on safe cookware, not on aluminum and nonstick pans.
mhm.
That's the one thing that I think about when I ask my husband, I'm like, "Can we go eat out? Because I don't want to cook or do dishes." But we have to drive 45 minutes to go anywhere.
Oh, you really
Usually,
live in the middle of
yeah.
nowhere.
So usually when he's like after a long day at work, he's like, "No, we're just gonna eat at home. I'll cook something when I get home if you really don't want to cook." So which is
But
great
that's
because
all I really
I
wanted to
know,
do
yeah.
anyway.
Because I'm also like sometimes I'm like, man, they're cooking my Brussels sprouts back there on canola oil in an aluminum pan or a non-stick pan. But I don't think about that anymore. It's about balance. Like you
Yes.
said, stress is a toxin, and a lot of times we don't realize that that's probably the main thing that's causing inflammation in our body.
Very truthful, and especially when it comes to the fertility journey, like, we have these very stressful lifestyles that we're expected to lead and all these expectations, and then add struggling with fertility, and then most of the time trying to keep it a secret because you're afraid to talk to anybody about it. On top of that,
Yeah,
it's a recipe for a lot of nervous system dysregulation.
yeah, yeah. It's very nervous. The nervous system is very important to be regulated for your body to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Before we sign off, can you give us what's your favorite mantra, or like just like a little nugget for anyone who's struggling with fertility?
Yeah, I feel like I could say a million things here, but just really that there is hope. I think so much of the fertility journey just like slowly strips away hope of healing, hope of being able to have the pregnancy and have it happen in the way that they planned. And, I think our traditional medicine model, kind of does strip that hope away for people when they shove them towards these fertility treatments right away. But know that there just is so much hope. There can be action in the waiting. My practice, I have my practice founded on my foundation of faith. And so I talk about that a lot and trusting in the Lord and his timing, but he also calls us to action. And I think, while we're waiting, we can be good stewards of our body and learn how to take care of our overall health, to be able to optimize our fertility. And just, it gives you so much peace in the waiting that you wouldn't have otherwise.
That's beautiful. All right, Dr. Trisha, tell us where our listeners can find you. And everything's going to be in the show notes, but please share.
Yeah. Well, I am best found over on Instagram at Trisha Zehrung. So check the show notes so you don't spell it wrong. I'm over there sharing all kinds of fertility information, support, guidance, opinions, all the things. Love just giving that. I use my Instagram, as really just like my free platform to provide you with as much value as I can. And maybe that's all you need. I've had women message me, oh, I got pregnant just from following your advice on Instagram. Like, great. Maybe that's all you need. So that's why I do what I do over there. But yeah, that is absolutely the best place to find me, and shoot me a DM. If you follow me, I will shoot you a DM because I DM all my new followers. But I love, love, love chatting with people in there and getting to know their stories and their journeys and just seeing how I can help.
Amazing. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Dr. Trisha. Until next time. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please click the subscribe button, share it with others, post about it in social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or suggest topics, you can follow me on Instagram at Fatima Pagtakan or at The Wellness Rebel Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.